Alright, I am back with another video, and today I'm doing something a little bit different. I've decided to try doing another modded build, and I kind of spoke about it at the end of my last one, which was the Pirate Lord, but I wanted to try mixing Hexblade and Bladesinger, because really, with the equipment in this game allowing for, various different boosts to different stats, it felt like it might be a pretty easy job to be able to pull off, being able to manipulate certain stats, getting certain equipment that's going to boost for various features that Bladesinger and Hexblade would provide us, etc. And as such I decided to give it a try, and honestly I'm quite happy with the results. Now of course the biggest question that comes up with this is kind of what do we actually get out of each class? Well, the notable things that we're going to be getting, mainly from Bladesinger, is the Bladesong, which is going to give us a massive boost to our AC based on our int modifier, which, because we have a maxed out int modifier with this build, would be a +5. We get a ton of extra movement speed, about 10 feet, we get advantage on acrobatics, dexterity saving throws, and a bonus to constitution saves equal to our intelligence modifier, again a +5. Basically and that is just from level 2 of wizard when you first get Bladesinger, and you kind of activate that as a bonus action, and that is going to allow you to basically just be an extremely mobile, adept, hard to hit and hard to stop spellcaster. Your concentration spells are going to be harder to deal with, you are not going to be able to be as attacked as much, and you're even going to get a bonus on those saving throws for AoE spells. It is just going to overall make you a very nimble and hard to hit character. But of course, being a Bladesinger as well would mean you'd get to use weapons as well, which is brilliant, and that fits nicely with Hexblade. But the main thing that we want from Bladesinger is the level 6 extra attack. With extra attack, it is great because it makes us, a full martial fighter, but Bladesinger extra attack is quite special in the fact that it allows you to use cantrips as part of the extra attack. So if you use a cantrip, say Booming Blade, or with the Hexblade, Eldritch Blast, you can then go ahead and mix those up. Use Eldritch Blast, then extra attack. Make a weapon attack, use Eldritch Blast, or Booming Blade, or what have you. And that's kind of the main focus of this build, kind of integrating the best of both worlds, making a proper martial fighter that can make use of things like Eldritch Blast in unique ways in combat, being able to fire off blasts while swinging swords and get a ton out of it. So when I say that, I mean a ton of power, because with the Hexblade we're going to get a couple of awesome things. We would get, Hex Warrior, allowing us to use our weapons with our charisma modifier rather than our dex. And this build also gets 20 charisma as well, so 20 intelligence, 20 charisma. Both of our spellcasting stats are going to be absolutely huge for the purposes of whatever we need to use them for. Like I say, we're going to have really high AC with Bladesinger, but we're also going to have really high attack and damage rolls with our Hex Warrior feature using our Charisma, which is also going to make us a great face of the party as well, being able to do things like, persuasion and deception checks really, really well, stuff like that. And also with Hexblade, you're also going to get Hexblade's Curse, allowing you to mark an enemy, probably a big boss, and get a bunch of extra benefits, allowing you to do bonus damage equal to your proficiency modifier, crit, and allow you to crit on a 19 or 20 against them, and when they die, you heal, equal to your Warlock level plus your Charisma modifier and HP. So overall, between Bladesong making us extremely hard to hit and allowing us to maintain our big concentration spells like Hex or later on Haste, and then with our Hexblade's Curse allowing us to turn that into big damage as well, dealing extra damage, critting more often, and then healing on top of that, you're going to be very, very hard to deal with, even though you're mostly a spellcaster, so you get to be this perfect blend of a martial warrior and a spellcaster. You can also get Pact of the Blade on top of this, which is going to give you another extra attack as well when we reach Hexblade level 5, and because of the way Baldur's Gate 3 works, if you're not playing on Honor mode, Pact of the Blade extra attack and the Bladesinger extra attack will stack, meaning you're going to get a bunch of extra attacks, but if you're playing on Honor mode, that does not happen. However, this build will still work absolutely fine in Honor mode, trust me. And in fact, Hexblade is also going to give us a ton of interesting invocations, like Agonizing Blast, which will allow our Charisma modifier to affect our Eldritch Blast, making it do even more damage. And also grabbing Devil's Sight as well, allowing us to do the Darkness Devil's Sight combo on top of all of this, meaning our enemies are going to have disadvantage to hit us, well, we have advantage to hitting them, which will be absolutely insane. And we also get to pick up some of the bonus invocations that come up from playing Hexblade as well, because the mod also adds the other Eldritch invocations in. Now, I went with Grasp of Hadar for this build because the idea of using Eldritch Blast to actually pull your enemies into melee range sounded really, really fun, but in practice it didn't really work out as well. You'll see in the combat footage that's playing now that half the time it just didn't work anyway, so I don't know if that's an issue with the mod or what, but it didn't feel very useful in the end, so I could see Lance of Lethargy, which would make it so that enemies have to use more movement speed to reach you, would probably be more powerful. Blast from afar, force them to use their dash to come close to you, meaning that they can't attack you as much, and then wail on them with your melee attacks, Booming Blade, Eldritch Blast, what have you. Also, Eldritch Smite could work out, using your Warlock spell slots to deal extra force damage, an extra d8 of force damage equal to the level of the spell slot you use. With the final leveling scheme that I'll be showing in a minute, you'll have level 3 spell slots, so twice per lot short rest you could get a decent chunk of damage out of your melee attacks, but I would probably stick to Lance of Lethargy as my personal pick. That is kind of what we're looking to get out of this build. You want a very mobile caster/fighter who can do a ton of damage with both melee and spells, basically your cantrips like Eldritch Blast and Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade, but while also being extremely hard to hit with amazingly high AC and being able to maintain important concentration spells like Hex, Darkness or Haste to be able to absolutely rock the battlefield and take on big bosses. Again, this is kind of a boss beater. Your Hexblade Curse is going to be a decent chunk of extra damage between being able to crit more and the proficiency bonus damage, so you're going to want to be focusing on the main bad guy. Larger groups, unfortunately, unlike 5e, you can't move your Hexblade's Curse to another character once they've died. You just get the healing, which kind of sucks, but I can understand maybe why. It is a little bit broken. So, and you kind of also have to manage your action economy, as both Hexblade's Curse and Bladesong both cost a bonus action, so you're probably going to want to cast Bladesong before you go into combat, and then use Hexblade's Curse to initiate it. But yeah, that's what we're kind of trying to get with this build, and as you can see by the combat footage, everything I've explained works really, really nicely together. We're able to use both Eldritch Blast and, Blade and our melee attacks quite effectively. Blade Dancer is keeping us alive, as well as some healthy castings of the shield spell. Got a lot of use out of that. And again, if you watched my Pirate Lord video, some of this might seem a bit familiar. We are using a lot of spells that are going to basically increase our defenses, shield being a big one. We're mainly getting offensive cantrip, more damage out of our offensive cantrips, but you can take offensive spells with this build if you like. There's nothing stopping you. You're still a wizard warlock at the end of the day. There's a lot available to you. But let's get into the actual build, such as the leveling and the equipment. So, let me just press that button. There we go. So, the final leveling scheme I went for this build is starting off with a level of fighter. A level of fighter is going to give you constitution saving for proficiency, as well as early access to all of your weapon proficiencies, even though Hexblade does get them too. It's kind of nice to get that con save proficiency and the fighting style as well, in which case I've gone with dueling since we're using a one-handed weapon, but a two-handed versatile weapon can work, so if you wanted to, you could use like a longsword or something and get a bit of more damage out of that. That will also work. You just have to remember that blade dancing requires you to have a non-two-handed weapon, and you can't be using a shield or wearing anything higher than light armor. We've gone with clothing for this build, so that's not really going to matter to us, but overall you just want to make sure you're being careful about what you choose to wear. And again, that can kind of suck as a martial fighter to not have access to much armor. However, with mage armor and again all of the other buffs that we have, our AC is going to be pretty high regardless. So again, starting with that level of fighter for the constitution saving throw proficiency as well, between that and blade dancing, you're going to have a lot of chances to save your important spells, so you don't have to worry about that too much. I've gone for 6 levels of wizard because that's how many you need to get the extra attack from blade singing, and warlock level 5 gives us that extra attack with our deepened pact of the blade, as well as an extra invocation and all of our hexblade goodness. So overall you're going to be sitting at level 3 spell slots for both classes, which is kind of nice. I mean, it's more than enough spells to get the job done more often than not, as you can see, as you saw in the combat footage, so I feel like it works. As for the actual progression of this build, I would probably start playing the game as either a full Bladesinger or a full Hexblade, whatever you feel like is more important to you. I wouldn't recommend starting with the fighter level right off the bat, maybe just respecking into that once you have enough levels. just because it's not 100% necessary, because if you go with Bladesinger, you get to pick a one-handed weapon proficiency anyway, so you're not worrying about that. And if you take that one level dip into Hexblade maybe early on as well, you get all of those goodies. But the main thing is the ability score stuff. You're going to have to kind of wait until you get the equipment that's going to allow you to manipulate them a bit more accurate, a bit more like the way you want them to be. So overall, I would actually probably start this build as a pure Bladesinger, wait until I'm a high enough level and I have certain equipment, then respec into the rest of this to get the full benefit. So for your starting stats, depending on what you're playing, I would recommend a 16 in Dexterity, a 14 in Constitution, and then another 16 in either your Intelligence or your Charisma, depending on what you want to play first. Again, my personal recommendation is going Bladesinger first, so I would put that into Intelligence. But once you're looking at the final stats for this build, you're going to want a 14 in Dexterity, an 8 in Constitution, a 17 in either Intelligence or Charisma, because you're going to be using Ethel's Boon to boost up that one, the one that you made 17, and then putting your other stats, either Intelligence or Charisma, to 16 as well. In the case of this build, I went with a 17 in Charisma, Ethel's Boon's +1 there, and then I'm using the Birthright Hat to push it up to 20, allowing for 2 ability score improvements to bump our Intelligence from a 16 to a 20 by the end of the build. Then, in order to patch up that Constitution, I am using the Amulet of Greater Health as an endgame item to allow us to push our Constitution score to 23 and give us advantage on Constitution saving throw checks as well, meaning we're pretty much never going to be dropping concentration, so you might find that the fighter level isn't actually that necessary. I mainly wanted it for the fighting style, but if you feel like you want to drop that entirely, another level into Hexblade would give you the ability to make Undead Servants, or another level into Bladesinger would give you access to level 4 spells and level 4 spell slots, which you may find some use for, but this is still a pretty well-balanced average build either way. So as for the rest of the equipment here that you're going to want, we're going to be grabbing the Cloak of Protection. This is just going to give us even more AC. In fact, I will quickly show off the full AC with our... Let's have a look. Lady, can you turn around? Thank you. With our Mage Armour up. As a base, we have 18 AC. This is coming from our Mage Armour, our Dexterity, our Cloak, and our Robe, as well as Evasive Instinct, which for some reason I'm forgetting where that's coming from. Our Boots, that's where that's coming from. So, with the Cloak of Protection, that's going to give you a +1 to armor class and saving throws, which is nice. The Potent Robe is really nice because it's clothing, so it works with Mage Armor. It allows our cantrips to deal additional damage equal to our Charisma modifier, that being Green Flame Blade, Booming Blade, and Eldritch Blast. Very nice. For the gloves, I've gone with the Daredevil Gloves, because what this does is it gives us a +1 bonus to spell attack rolls, which is great. That means our cantrips and such are more likely to hit. And our ranged spell attacks are treated as melee spell attacks when we're adjacent to a hostile creature. So we can use this to cast Eldritch Blast at close range, basically meaning that we don't have to suddenly get out of combat in order to be able to use it, because this build would feel pretty awkward if you're constantly having to move in and out of the melee range of enemies, especially when we are a melee fighter as well. So this is going to allow us to fire off Eldritch Blasts without any care in the world, which is great. But if you feel like you don't mind kind of maneuvering around the battlefield to kind of get the right angles and distances, because after all, we do have a lot of movement speed with this build, there's a couple of options. In Act 1, you can pick up the Braces of Defense, which would give you a +2 to your armor class as long as you are not wearing armor or holding a shield. We're not, so this would give us a decent 20 AC before any potential buffs, which could be really nice. But an Act 3 option, as the Daredevil Gloves are Act 2, so you could kind of go with these, then the Daredevil Gloves, but if you want to play a bit more risky, you can go into Act 3 and get the Spellmight Gloves. The Spellmight Gloves would give you basically a sharpshooter, but for spells. When casting a spell that requires an attack roll, Eldritch Blast works for this, you can take a -5 penalty to the roll to deal an additional 1d8 damage. This is kind of okay. That potential extra damage is really, really nice, but with Sharpshooter and Great Weapon Monster, it's a flat 10 damage, whereas this is a 1d8 for the same penalty. So I personally don't think it's worth it, but I thought I might show it off for those who want to see if they can get that absolute maximum power. But in my opinion, the Daredevil Gloves do the job a lot better, just allowing you to have a lot more freedom to maneuver, or the Braces of Defense to just give you that even higher level of tankiness. Maybe you'll have less less usage of shield with these, but overall it's entirely up to you. And finally, the Bone Spike Boots. This is just going to give us a +1 bonus to armor class and saving throws, as long as we are not wearing armor or holding a shield. Our jump distance is increased by 1.5 meters, giving us even more maneuverability, and we also gain a special jump that can knock enemies prone, which could help with getting advantage, because when you knock enemies prone, you gain advantage against hitting them, which can be really nice. As for our final accessories here, I've already gone over the Amulet of Greater Health, but I've also picked up the Strange Conduit Ring to allow us to, while concentrating, which we should basically constantly be doing, our weapon attacks deal an additional 1d4 psychic damage, and the Ring of Arcane Synergy, allowing us to, whenever we deal damage with a cantrip, we gain Arcane Synergy for 2 turns. For those of you that don't know, Arcane Synergy allows you to deal additional damage with your weapon attacks equal to your spell casting ability modifier. This would use either our intelligence or our charisma, since they're both the same, and would make our weapon attacks deal even more damage. And this, of course, since we're using Booming Blade, Green Flame Blade, and Eldritch Blast, we're going to basically be having this up constantly. But of course, a lot of these pieces of gear are later into the game or are in the end game, so I'll go over some earlier game options for you. For our Amulet, since we won't have the Amulet of Greater Health right away, the Amulet of the Harpers is quite nice, giving you advantage on Wisdom saving throw checks and a usage of shield once per long rest. Not the greatest thing in the world. I mean, the advantage on Wisdom saving throws is the main thing here, and that extra usage of shield could come in clutch if you're trying to save your spell slots, but we're mainly here for the advantage on Wisdom saves. This is just a decent item you can pick up in Act 2. That'll work out quite nicely. I also do have an alternate ring option here. This is an Act 3 option, but it could be nice. It's the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel. After hitting a creature with a weapon attack, you can cast illusion or enchantment spells as a bonus action, basically just giving you a bit more freedom after hitting a weapon attack as to what you can do with your spells on your turn. An example of a good enchantment spell to use with this would be something like Hold Person, and unfortunately Darkness is an evocation spell, but you can definitely get some usage out of this. You could cast Mirror Image as a bonus action to give you even more AC. There's a lot you can do with this, so feel free to experiment with your spell choices. This could make it quite fun. For a headpiece option, I've got 2 potential ones here. The Diadem of Arcane Synergy would allow you to gain Arcane Synergy whenever you inflict a condition. That could be the condition given by Booming Blade, that could be Hexblade's Curse. It could just be another way to get Arcane Synergy, perhaps if you don't want to use the Ring of Arcane Synergy or you don't have it yet, but I would definitely probably use the Ring and then replace this with the Birthright later. But you could also go for the Helmet of Arcane Accurity. Now be warned that this is light armor, so you might not even have the robe yet and might be wearing light armor anyway, so this won't matter, but just be careful that mage armor will not work if you're wearing robes and have this on. But allows us to, whenever we deal damage with a weapon attack, you can gain Arcane Accurity. Arcane Accurity will basically allow the affected entity, which is us, to have a +1 bonus to spell attack rolls and spell difficulty class for each remaining turn. So our spells become harder to dodge the more we attack with a weapon, which for us makes perfect sense. But again, the Birthright hat should be the end goal to get the most out of your charisma. And then finally, since this is also an Act 3 option for your boots, I've gone with the Disintegrating Nightwalkers as a decent Act 1 option, or just a perfect alternative if you don't care about the extra AC. This will allow you to no longer be enwebbed, entangled, or ensnared, and cannot slip on grease or ice, and also allow you to cast Misty Step once per short rest without expending a spell slot. Overall, just a great Act 1 option that I recommend quite a lot on this channel, and as such you'd get a lot of use out of it. As for the Daredevil Gloves and the Potent Robe, these are both Act 2. The Cloak of Protection is also Act 2, and you can get these pretty much fairly early on, so you don't need to worry about them. I've also picked, and now let's get into the weapons. You can use any non-two-handed weapon with this build. My personal choice here that I've gone for is the Belm. Belm is basically going to allow us to wield a pretty powerful one-handed weapon. It's an Act 3 option, but again, you can use literally whatever you like as long as it's not two-handed, and Belm is quite nice as it does give us a bonus action attack as well, and once per short rest we can use the Whirlwind attack, which is usually locked behind level 11 Hunter Ranger, so it's just a nice kind of spin attack that we can use. And I thought it fit quite nicely with this build aesthetically, but again, remember you can use whatever non-two-handed weapon you like, so anything versatile or one-handed. Feel free to experiment. Longswords, tridents, warhammers, battle axes even, rapiers, short swords, scimitars, daggers, you name it, you can use it. Just be careful. that you're not using anything two-handed, as that will shut down a lot of features that this build uses. And also make sure you don't equip a shield, like I said before. And also, of course, I've slapped the Darkfire shortbow on this build, allowing us to gain a usage of haste once per long rest, as well as passive resistance to both fire and cold damage, just to give us a bit more tankiness to some of the game's more common elements, and if push comes to shove, it is a ranged attack if for some reason perhaps we are silenced. But overall you're mainly going to be using Eldritch Blast. This is just here to be a permanent buff for us. And as for some kind of significant spells to look out for while you're leveling up this build from either class, again, our spellcasting modifiers are the same for both. Green Flame Blade and Booming Blade are obviously the big ones alongside Eldritch Blast. I've already mentioned Mirror Image, Misty Step is a great option, Haste is brilliant, Armour of Agathis can give you extra tanking and a bit of retaliation damage, and Hex as well can be a great early concentration spell to be able to get more damage out of your attacks, and Magic Missile is an ever-reliable ranged attack if you just need something that is guaranteed to hit. And of course we need to bring Mage Armour as well, it is pretty much a requirement for this build. So yeah, I can quickly show off what the AC looks like with Bladesong as enabled as well, and as you can see we have a total of 23 AC as a base. This is not counting shield, you could even go with Mirror Image or something like I said, and really get those numbers up and make you hard to hit. So, and even Haste would give you an extra 2 as well, so we can really bump it up. I'm just doing this to see it because it seems like it would be fun. Yeah, look, 34 AC, which is just a fun, dumb number. Obviously, this won't be permanent, but having a base of, like, at least around 23 with just Bladesong is pretty nice. So I think overall this build is going to be very, very tanky, as well as being very hard to hit, very hard to break concentration on, and being able to deal a ton of damage overall. And again, you have a ton of different strategies here. Haste could work. Darkness can work, Hex can work. Hex is probably a bit stronger in the earlier game compared to the late game, but you know, you have the option to use both. And yeah, that is the build. Overall, I think this is a really, really fun usage of the different classes, the mods working together quite nicely to kind of, you know, synergize quite well and give us a ton of different features like extra damage and all this other fun stuff. And it's more just like a fun thing to kind of base for to like kind of mix together the two kind of blade subclasses, Bladesinger and Hexblade, which are two extremely popular-ish subclasses or Spellsword subclasses that people love to use. I mean, obviously I'm not the first person to do this. Colby over from D4 was a huge inspiration for this build. His kind of experimentation into doing this in 5e was really good. I watched that video back when it came out about a year ago now, and I was kind of thinking about it and thought, actually, you know what? I'd quite like to do this. So a huge shout out to him for kind of inspiring this build in the first place. As I kind of sign off here, I mean, you've kind of already been seeing the combat footage quite a lot throughout this video. I'll quickly go over some end of video stuff now. So, why does this video exist, and why is it so different to my usual content? Well, I'm trying to experiment a bit more. I feel like, again, a lot of stuff I've kind of been making these kind of videos for a long time, so I'm trying to change things up a bit. I wanted to make a shorter style of video, something a bit quicker, so I tried showing off something that is just more like going over the highlights of what we're trying to go for here, and, you know, changing up kind of like the overall flow of the video, showing more combat footage, and kind of just going for a different kind of vibe and seeing how it goes. I mean, this style of video might not be very popular, in which case I'll go back to the old style, but hey, I'm just trying to experiment right now. Anyway, the whole point of this video is to not keep it too long, so I'm going to sign off now. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.